Hello and welcome to EQ Above IQ, Parenting with Emotional Intelligence and Healing the Inner Child. My name is Trina Casey and I'm your host. In this episode of EQ Above IQ, I'm going to talk about something that is weighing heavy on my mind and my heart, and it may seem unimportant to many people who maybe aren't into movies or action heroes or the other many media influences that we have out in the world. But I'm a little bit saddened and shook today when I heard about Chadwick Boseman. And as many people will know him as Black Panther, King of Wakanda. And I was really impacted when I read that he had passed away from colon cancer and had been struggling with it for the past 4 years. So basically, just after Black Panther hit theaters, Chadwick was dealing with cancer the whole entire time. And he did it with grace and autonomy, and it just really honed into me that as individuals, and we are living in this world, this EQ-less world. I'm not going to say this world is emotionally intelligent. We have a major lack of emotional intelligence in this world at the moment. And as we're going through it, we don't realize how many people are dealing with struggles, are dealing with illness, are dealing with pain. And to me, this was a perfect time to really talk about our need to increase compassion and empathy in this world. There's so much going on, and there's so much our kids are seeing on television, in the news, on social media, that can be just heartbreaking. And it really is. I have to do a lot in order to keep myself in a glass half full kind of perspective. And I'm not always successful. And the reason is because, like I always say, this world is about duality, and we're going to have a good and a bad, which I don't really like good and bad, but we're going to have our different waves of emotion all the time. And this morning when I woke up and I read this news, I looked at my son, who said, after watching Black Panther for the first time in the theaters, full of happiness and joy, because it was the first real Black superhero that we had seen on the big screen. And I'm not talking about action heroes, because we've had action heroes. We've had Will Smith, we've had Denzel Washington, we've had Wesley Snipes, and I am not, knocking their contributions, but on a big global scale, Black Panther was a whole nother phenomenon, because it went global, and it went global in such a positive way. We had no idea as a culture how impactful it would be to see a Black man on the screen being the lead, with other Black actresses and actors who were powerful just because they were powerful, and they were strong just because they were strong, and they were proud, and it was exciting. And there's a whole generation now who didn't have that before. There's a whole generation that got to see that on the big screen and feel like I can be powerful. And it didn't just impact Black children, it impacted all children in their perception of what Blackness is. And as we as a culture are racially divided at the moment, because there are so many powers that would like to divide us, because they know once we are united together in purpose, there's nothing that is going to stop the necessary changes that need to happen in the world. They know this is a shot to the heart. So I really wanted to talk about it, and my emotions of why Chadwick's work was so important, and he had other support, of course. There's so many, Lupita and all the other people, but it was impactful because even as a child myself, I never saw anything like that. My superhero was Wonder Woman, and she didn't look like me. I remember one Halloween wearing the costume, and I have this picture, and it's a white mask. And I never knew how long how far-reaching that image would be, where I would have to wear a mask to feel comfortable with the skin I'm in, for how many decades later that it would take for me to take off that mask. And I don't know that it will fully ever be removed. I know that I'm way more emotionally intelligent now, so I don't see things in the same way. But it really is important that we show our children images of people that don't just look like us. And to all my listeners out there who are Caucasian, I appreciate you listening to me and acknowledging that I do have some wisdom that I can share with you, that it is not just a black and white thing, that it's a human thing, that all of these BS rules that have been created to divide us can no longer work if we choose to not make them work. The beautiful thing about this current state, and though I know it's hard to hear that there is something beautiful about it, because it's quite painful as yet another black man is murdered, or attempted murder, Jacob Blake, and then another one who murdered two was basically allowed to walk down the streets with an AR rifle and just shoot people. And is still not in jail that I know of. I know he's been arrested, but not given back to the state in which he committed the crime. I just want to remind people that there are people who don't look like me supporting this cause, supporting this change. There has always been allies. It's just at some point when we got the current administration we have in America in place, we forgot how hard we worked as a country to start to create reality. Now, there have been a lot of delusions around equality, because we all know that that's not 100%, but I know we've been moving towards it. In this last 4 years, there has been a major regression or surfacing of hate. And let me really explain to you, that hate is not even towards the other person. That's the hate we have for ourselves. I'm sorry, you can't go out and hate another person unless you don't like who you are. And that's why emotional intelligence is so important. None of this would be happening if people had the self-awareness and the ability to regulate and then understand why they are motivated to do what they do. I ask that question all the time, and there's a lot of debates going on. Today I had to do my handoff with my son, and My ex commented after I said, hey, Black Panther died. And usually I don't get into many conversations. Our exchanges are really quick, and we have logistical conversations only because there's too much emotional baggage, and I really don't have the desire to have my motivation and joy zapped from me from having a brief exchange. There's a lot of work still to be done on the emotional level. And so I choose to keep my conversations brief. And that is my way of having good and positive self-regulation, because I acknowledge I'm easily triggered because of the circumstances of things that happened. So, but for the most part, we keep it very good for the sake of our son, because that's my motivation. My motivation for keeping our relationships civil is to see that my son has two healthy, regulated, emotionally regulated parents to model after. And so I do my best. It happens, and then I have to repair, where I have to have an explanation and conversation, because it's impossible not to happen sometimes, that a disagreement might arise. Usually the disagreements arise around how we care differently for my son. So, but anyways, I mention it because my son was taking his time in the toilet, and normally he doesn't really come into my space, but I allowed it because I was in a soft emotional state because of what had just happened, what I had just read. And I thought maybe by me sharing that he had died, and I thought he was a fan of the movie as well, he might have a better understanding of the impact. But instead of, I don't mean to air my laundry, this really has a point to it. Instead of just hearing it when I said, Chadwick was one of the first, I think I said heroes, but I meant superheroes, that really had a major impact on the world. He went into his phone to try to look up invalidating info. So, no, there's Will Smith, there's all these other people. Yeah, but it wasn't the same. And I was bothered by that. I was like, well, what's the motivation of you having to do that? And it goes back to a lot of old history of disloyalty and things like that. And I just was bothered by it. But I kept it together as best I could, and then told my son to hurry up so that we could leave. And sadly, my son was sitting in his room and he was listening. And he said, "You guys are arguing?" I said, "I'm not having an argument. We're disagreeing on something." And, but argument is totally a different, wouldn't be called an argument. It was called something else. Well, and I just said, when somebody shares to you, which was to him just a death of somebody who is basically become an important part of the movement of a group of people you belong, it might not be a good idea to just look for sources to invalidate, because that actually means that you have no compassion for the situation in general. And we've had several conversations about this, and unfortunately it goes to more of a conversations of logical things rather than emotional things. And so a statement was made about not allowing emotions to rule everything. And that's true. Emotions should not rule everything, but emotions are also very important signposts that something is not right, and they have a very important role. The problem arises when we don't have the ability to regulate those emotions. When those emotions get crazy and turned to yelling, to murder, to war. And we live in a world of dysregulation at the moment. Every time a war starts, it's based on something that these powerful people want you to get up angry and upset about, but it's really BS. It's really not even important to you, your life. It's always a symbol of some scarcity. And we don't have much scarcity in the world. We have tons of abundance. It's just controlled by a few. I think that I just read that Jeff Bezos became the first 200 billionaire in history. I cannot believe in that. And the sad part is he doesn't pay many taxes like many of the multi-billionaires out there. But I'm not going to get political. I'm going to stay on topic, but I throw that in because it shows that this big, massive group really lacks empathy for all the millions of people globally who are struggling with starvation, who are struggling to have roofs over their heads, who are dying in wars that mean nothing to them. It's all about land grabs or resources or just pure genocide, because somebody's offended about somebody else. Many people will say, no, it's not about that. It's about money and power. But when you get underneath, it's about self-hate. It's about insecurity. It's about not feeling good enough. And that is why it's so important to teach your kids the principles of emotional intelligence so that they never get to this place of looking at somebody else as the enemy. As they say, the enemy is always within. We don't need wars. We don't need race identification because we're only one race. We are the human race. We don't need gender designation because, again, love has no gender. And I wrote a really great book about that called I Love Pink. All we need to do is stop the idea that there is a need for supremacy by anybody, whether it's white, Black, Latino. And, my ex pointed out that, this has been going on forever. And this is a very strong argument point for many right-wing people and say, Black people had slaves, Arabic countries, slaves, there's still slavery going around. And why is this the topic? I didn't own slaves. And you know what? It's true. It's true. But you know why this continues to happen is because when it's happening, the people who are currently in the position of oppression decide that they don't want to take responsibility, and they deflect, and they talk about the past, and they talk about this group or that group, and all of those things are truth. So it's not like it's a lie, but what it is a strong deflection and reasoning to keep the status quo, to keep things as they are. I've yet to see a society in history who says, hey, my bad, we need to fix this and keep to our word, and that society not begin to thrive. When I went to Egypt with my son last year, we took an amazing Nile cruise, and just me and him, because Egyptology was my jam back in college. It was my jam, is what I wanted to do. And so I was so overjoyed that me and my son got to do this cruise down the Nile, and we stopped at a temple. Gosh, what was the name of the temple? I think it was the temple for Hatshepsut. And she was one of she ruled Egypt before King Tut came into power, and it was unprecedented peace. She was known to be fair. She was known to be strong but fair and just, and it prospered beyond what was expected. And then she was betrayed by her nephew, and all of her images were taken down and just destroyed, and then bad things started happening. Now, the reason why I bring that up is not for gender bias. What I bring it up to illustrate is that when we take responsibility for what is happening, we can then make changes. We do not have to do the same thing over and over, but we are damned to do the same thing over and over if we do not acknowledge on a personal level and a global level that we have been doing things wrong, because we are blinded by our own arrogance. We're blinded by our own need or fear, actually, of being wrong. We're so fearful. But those mistakes that we make, those stumbles, are the building blocks to greatness. So when a society or when an individual can take ownership of their mistakes, they can build great things from them. And this is what we need to be teaching our children: not to deflect, not to dodge responsibility, because it never changes. It never changes. You know, I've been asked the question, do you take responsibility for the problems that blacks created, or Africans selling other Africans? And I said, you know what, I do. Not in the way that, I stay up at night thinking about it. I see the repercussions of it, though. So I do take responsibility in the sense that responsibility is the ability to respond. It's not a negative thing. It's how you respond to something. And so therefore, I've spent the entirety of my childhood, all the way up to the time I can remember, never, I'm not lying, never being mean to beat someone because they're different. I have never, whether it's weight, whether it's looks, whether it's anything to do with language, country, I have never put somebody else down because of that. Their actions, I have maybe questioned, but not based on where they're from and the things that they can't change, like their skin color. So yes, I have taken responsibility, and I have felt deep pain and sorrow for our people. I mean, like I don't know Chadwick personally, but I know he has a mother, and I know he has a father and family who is, I'm getting emotional, who are in pain at him leaving this plane of existence. And so I can feel a lot for them. And when we all start looking at emotions not as something to avoid, because avoiding emotions is the problem nowadays. Buck up, stay strong, be resilient. But you don't have to be emotionalist to be resilient. You can feel it all, but you just need to get up. You need to regulate it. You are allowed to feel anger. There's a lot of things to be angry about right now. Just don't go out and shoot somebody because of it. Go run, hit something. Just don't hit somebody. Feel your emotions because they are the signposts that something needs to change. And that's what's going on right now. Something needs to change. And we have the power to make that happen when we start with ourselves. That internal compass that we all have needs to be turned in the right direction. And we all need to get together and agree. And we need to show our children that we can do this, because this world that we live right now, it will be their joy or their burden. Hear that again. The world that we leave for our children now will be their joy or reward or their burden. So let's do better, people. Let's do better with ourselves so that we can do better with others, and we can be socially aware and do better with each other. There shouldn't be people out in the streets so afraid that they're going to lose something that they kill another person. What do you think you're going to lose? The one thing I promise you that you'll lose is your empathy. You will lose your spirit. You will lose the ability to see your fellow human in front of you, and you will lose yourself. There's never been a problem solved with a gun. Never. And once we, as a global family, start acknowledging that all of this is coming from inside of us, we can change it. So, I hope this episode of EQaboveIQ made you feel something, because I had a lot of feelings as I'm doing this and I'm saying this, and I'm moved to tears today at the amount of loss that we are experiencing, but the amount of internal pain that we have to come to grips with. So please, please, please breathe. Take ownership of your own emotions. Don't put them on other people. Figure out where they're coming from. Journal. As a cognitive behavioral therapy coach, journaling is key. Please take the time to write down those thoughts that are lies about yourself and replace them with the truths. Do this daily. You look in the mirror and say, I'm fat. Nope. That's not it. You're not fat. What you are is a person that needs some motivation to move their body. What else is going on? Let's stop this cycle of self-loathing, because if we don't, we won't be able to fix this once and for all. There never needs to be a low man on the totem pole or low woman. We can all exist together on this plane, together on the same level, and nobody will lose. There's no loss with equality. None. So, thank you for listening. Share your hearts and love with your children. Be their model, and have a blessed day.